It's funny having my own synth plugin. It's something that's always been a bit of a goal of mine and the kind of back burner. I'm really interested in these very specific tools, and I'm excited when I've seen certain artists do their own tools around the kind of ideology they have. I've really enjoyed building on what was kind of established as a supersaw right in the 90s. And I think a lot of instrument design is about taking things that exist in the world and looking at the corners of it, like, oh, what could we do? What could be improved or flipped on its head? Or so actually to be involved in those sort of processes, that's the enjoyment that you're building into this sort of family tree of a musical idea that was started a long time ago. I'm A.G. Cook, and I'm here with Native Instruments at Baltic Studios in London to look at the SuperStarSaw, which is a supersaw plugin that we've been building over the last year. I started PC Music in 2013. It's a record label / collective. I've also worked a lot with Charli XCX on pretty much a decade's worth of mixtapes, albums, sort of starting with Number One Angel and Pop 2 and going through Brat and its current rollout. And I've also done stuff as A.G. Cook as a kind of solo artist, producer hybrid. My album 7G was 49 tracks spread across 7 discs, and it came at the same time as my other debut album, Apple. And then I did an album about 2 years ago called Britpop. And all of those have really been influenced on trying to build new tools and figure out new sounds. I know everyone sort of says this. I find it hard to describe my own sound because I'm really constantly trying to break it. That's what makes music interesting to me. I'm not even sure I'd be involved in music if it didn't have this ability to morph and change and sort of zoom in and zoom out, you know? So a lot of the experimentation I'm doing in my own music is really to keep myself interested, to be like, you know, I'm not necessarily trying to write the perfect song. Sometimes that's fun or whatever, but I'm trying to just, you know, stay engaged in a way. That's what I really love about making music on computers, is that really anything could happen very, very quickly. You know, any producer who claims to have whatever sound is 5 seconds away from opening up something that will create the total opposite, you know. So if anything, my sound is really trying to bring that to the forefront. I think the joy in experimenting with stuff is also really looking at these sort of binaries that may or may not exist, you know? So what's mainstream pop music, what's underground pop music, you know? It's sort of the same thing at the moment, but also on so many levels, you know, what's authentic, what's inauthentic, the sort of uncanny valley of all of that. I think it's present in most things, and I enjoy kind of resisting that division. But when I kind of come back to what is an A.G. Cook sound, so a lot of extreme contrast, minimalism, maximalism, finding ways to kind of use those together in an expressive way. So as my sound's developed, it's really going deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole. So I've had a very particular relationship with being in the box, right, on a laptop using nothing else. I don't always work like that. I really had a very strong phase when I was 17, 18, really getting into music seriously. I enjoyed having this hardline limitation of like, okay, no guitars, no MIDI keyboards. Like, it's really just the laptop, some monitors, and maybe a microphone, you know, if you're lucky. And there's also a kind of a joy in being able to load up pretty much anything and really quickly bounce between ideas, undo things, take huge risks that in the kind of real musical world would take ages to clean up, you know. But on a laptop, it's just, oh, I might as well just try that and see if it crashes. So a lot of my early work was very purist, really doing everything, using plugins really. As I have come full circle in a sense, not saying that I got too good at using a computer, but, you know, suddenly being able to play guitar again and not know how it works, you know, playing strange guitar tunings and things like that, where now that feels like a strange alien kind of outsider instrument, and that can inspire me again, almost how when I first started using software, I was inspired. So it's kind of finding areas in which you can be a novice as well. I know I'm going up, I know I'm going up, I know I'm going up. Let me think about some synth influences. All the things that really inspired me were synths or plugins that really did one thing in a really very bold way, rather than the perfect multi-use synthesizer. I would say Razor, which was a Reactor instrument, was a big one for really understanding actually quite a complex style of synthesis, right? It's an additive synth, but designed in this unique way that was very, very visual and really broke down the nuts and bolts. So it almost looked like a subtractive synth with a few dials that could completely explode it. Just the UI and the way that sounded started to, in a funny way, teach me about every other synth in this odd way. I mean, I am very inspired by some of the other stuff going on in Reactor, like laser bass is another fun one. These specific tools that are very designed around kind of one idea. One of the kind of foundational oscillator waves is the sawtooth or saw wave. You know, you've got the sine wave, which is the completely rounded, pure fundamental tone, right? But the saw wave, obviously shaped like a sawtooth, and because it has this sort of aggressive shape, where the harmonics kind of get much more involved, and it has a much sharper, clearer sound, you know, that is really, for a lot of synth patches that people use, is really one of the main oscillators and one of the main shapes. In my mind, the supersaw is really a 90s invention because it's about moving from sort of analog synths to proper digital, virtual analog instruments that can suddenly load way more oscillators than you normally be limited to. And we can make something that is much thicker and weirder and sort of more digital and ultimately ravier. It's essentially just stacking this saw wave. And the most obvious reference for people is always, oh, like the THX opening sound. You know, these voices that are spreading out or coming back into one big sound. So, I mean, I've used the supersaw in a lot of my sort of known tracks, really. If you're hearing a certain kind of large chord that has a sort of detuned kind of element or has some movement in it, across a lot of my stuff, the Charli mixtapes, one that I used it very overtly on was my track Superstar. The whole point was it starts as this kind of piano ballad and it gets taken over by these supersaws. So the kind of awkward rhythm of someone playing the piano gets replaced with these, at times, very dissonant but never fully dissonant kind of big chords. And it's sort of, yeah, about it all getting taken over in this funny way. Of course, yeah, 7G is a whole disc of it. There's a kind of silly track on there called Mad Max, which really sets the tone of just these very dissonant, at times almost atonal, and at times, you know, the supersaws get so thick that they're essentially percussion at that point. It stops even really being audible as a chord, and you just hear it as this block of sound. The SuperStarSaw goes quite a way back in terms of me wanting something like this, right? So I've obviously been making sounds along these lines for a while. I tried a few tools, you know, to kind of do them in a quicker way. You know, I talk a lot about working quite quickly while making music with people, but actually doing some of those more A.G. Cook style supersaw sounds is sometimes, when I'm using other plugins, one of the slowest parts of it, really. I have a track called Stargon, actually, which was used where I was using all these different plugins, but the detunes ramp up till they start forming completely new chords, and it's this quite gradual thing that happens. But it was a real pain to get that right and get all the automation and line everything up and have them meet at the right place. So I was, you know, always doing these long workarounds, some of which are fun, but this felt really pointless sometimes, you know, duplicating the same thing, having to do these funny workarounds, even trying to use different plugins together, because one of them would detune in this shape, another would detune in this shape. It was very difficult to feel like I was playing the synths or really messing with them in a proper musical way. So I was always like, okay, if I get the opportunity to build a plugin or come with an instrument idea, I have this one, you know, already, like always ready to go. There's a very early attempt at doing something more complex with supersaws that I did sort of bother to learn and code myself within Reactor. It was very, very rudimentary compared to this, but it was a few discrete voices that could have their own ADSR patterns, right? So you could hold down a note and it would start to get maybe more detuned or more dissonant a bit later. And even that one modification already sounded so different to other synths. It already made me kind of wonder about what I could possibly do down the line. The collaboration, has it been a year? I don't know. It's felt like a symbolic year, it might have been slightly longer, but I've been, collaborating with Native Instruments on this. And it was interesting too, because obviously it's a whole company, but it sort of started, I would say, with quite a small group, me describing my own ideas and us really going back and forth. I think my role was sort of talking about a few general visual ideas, really talking about these walls that I'd run into with other plugins and making some suggestions about kind of really zoomed out kind of architecture of it could be 2 layers or little things like that, and maybe how many saw waves I really wanted to have. So a very early question that came up was, should it only be saw waves? My immediate answer was definitely yes, of course, that's the whole point. It's a SuperStarSaw. But, it would have been fairly, I don't know if easy is the right word, but it would have been logical, straightforward to have this kind of oscillator waveform, shape control, and suddenly it's square waves, or to throw in some kind of noise oscillators that could throw it in certain ways. It became a much more fun game to see how much you can just push these saw waves, just from a musical purity, but also, once you add a really vast amount of saws, is that turning into some kind of noise? Can it do the same thing as a noise oscillator? The fun limitation of really sticking to saw waves and that being completely consistent, it's really a clear brief, especially in a world where you have sort of thousands of synthesizers. I think to do slightly less can be useful. When I was thinking about how the SuperStarSaw would actually work in terms of a synth, I had a strong sense that there'd be 2 layers, right? These 2 groups, because that's very often how I think about building sounds. It's almost like having a comedic duo. One half could be going crazy and the other half could be really showing you that fundamental core note, right? So it just became so obvious that the pink and green would stack really well. And they'd feel so distinct, So you have these 2 vivid, contrasting color worlds. Big part of our initial back and forth was just testing out these versions. And when I'd test them out, I'd really try and bring them to sessions, honestly, like when I'm finishing someone's album and loading up a chaotic plugin, like that's fun anyway, even if it might crash or whatever. So I'd say it was quite a few months of that. And then when everyone was really happy with the main features, everything from the UI to how you might do the presets, all of which I genuinely find interesting, because I think so much of that, even if I don't use presets that much, the way it feels to a kind of general audience is super important to me. When I start different tracks or songs, I'm trying to work quickly, just to be intuitive, I think. And sometimes when I'm starting a track with a synth by itself, I'm really loading up the initialize setting, working with really raw sounds that can then sort of turn on their head, even if I'm with another artist in the room or something. It's kind of fun to be working from these raw building blocks and then suddenly craft it around what they're doing, so it feels like responsive to a melody or some other idea or some rhythm or something, not for it to feel like I'm bringing this, amazing high-tech thing into the room. Like, oh, it already sounds amazing. I actually like it to start by sounding slightly rubbish and then building up into something quite quickly. All right, so now we're going to dive into the actual plugin, the SuperStarSaw, and I'm going to honestly work how I normally work while making patches or doing my own stuff. It can be a bit janky at times. Sometimes I'll program a sequence or something, but a lot of the time I'm just sort of mashing the keyboard keys and editing the sound while I do it. So let's say we're just on a pink layer. I'll mess with kind of adding some bits into that. So first I can add more voices, but they're all doing the same thing. So if I add a little bit of spread, and then width as well. Now the width gets more interesting when you start adding the motion. There's these kind of, you'll see on the pink one here, there's a kind of, it's labeled motion. I think of it as sort of star modulator. You can change the rate and even the phase. So you get these kind of asymmetrical shapes, but you can also just put that straight onto a few things like panning and amplitude, right? Of course, you can also do that same motion onto the pitch. So yeah, already really kind of wide parameters there. Now let's say I'll draw in some kind of chord progression so we can hear it. Let's do something simple with a big. So it's kind of a fun example of like a kind of thicker clustering chord. And let's say we make this corner a bit more similar to this one. And just increase the motion a little bit. And the nice thing is you can copy pink layer over to a green one, or you can just start randomizing the two of them, clicking a dice. I love doing this kind of stuff. That's quite a nice one. And then I'm going to take something like that and gradually turn it into something a little bit more tonal. Let's see if I can do that. And maybe even though pink and green are different, I could start snapping them to the same sort of harmony. I'm going to start a whole new one just to mess with it even more. So let me say it right at bass line. And you can find that exact breaking point as all the voices kind of converge and see just how much chaos is right to get the note through. This was nice, it didn't feel too much like one of my classic sounds. Just doing something really simple on one side and really kind of chordy in the other. And here you'll see there's a kind of very slow LFO that's sort of giving a kind of like dance filter to the... And you can see the green layer kind of snapping to this chord and moving around. Whereas the pink layer is completely raw. I could even turn that down an octave. I think I had this one. As I drag around, you can kind of open it up. So yeah, kind of a few relaxing kind of sounds you can do, as well as all the abrasive ones, really. When I'm using the plugin now to do, let's say, a sound I would have attempted to do previously on a bunch of other plugins strapped together, you know, it feels radically different. It's not so much that, oh, this synth can do everything, but it's that you can build up tracks where the whole overall feeling of it is working together, right? Where there's this kind of big gesture that could happen across all these different instruments. That is a big difference in terms of any kind of supersaw workflow I've had before. It's definitely unlocked a few perspectives for me, or sounds that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise. It's already become a go-to, even when we were developing it, and it's a lot of, yeah, it's genuinely fun for me to use. So it's a nice thing to bring out. This plugin is a sort of coda or epilogue or final chapter, I would say, to the albums I've already released as AG Cook. Obviously having the Britpop pink and green color scheme, but also echoes of 7G and Apple and the sounds in that, and feels more exciting than me just making a big sample pack of all those sounds, and actually know how can I really think to boil that stuff down into a tool or an instrument that can be used by lots of other people in different ways. So it throws down the gauntlet, I think, and sort of lets me reflect on all of that in a very different way, actually, and think about how my new albums might use some of that DNA, but also turn it on its head in some sense. So I think it's kind of a conclusion to one big train of thought I've had for the last few records.